Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Analytical Line. As always, thanks for joining me. I'm Josh Davis. I got a stacked show for today. PSU fans, if you missed last week, make sure to go back and check out that show. I fit my entire preseason analysis from the new coaching staff to the team and the schedule into just 45 minutes. Trust me, that video is worth your time. Non-PSU fans here, you're very welcome. Today's show is about all of college football. I'm going to try and cram everything into a show of all the teams. It's a lot, and let's jump right into it. I'm going to predict the playoffs based on roster, coaching staff, and schedule. Who will make the postseason tournament? This is based on the teams that I think will be here at the end of the season. This is not necessarily teams on how they're doing right now, even though it is heavily based on the off season. How will these teams do throughout this year? If I'm looking over here, this is where my notes are. I got 9 full pages of notes. Let's get right to it. Number 1, I got Indiana. The Hoosiers have done everything right. They deserve that number 1 spot, regardless of whether I think they're the best team. They've earned the benefit of the doubt. Last year, I walked out of Beaver Stadium after Penn State played Indiana, and I told my brother, nobody's beating that team. That was the best chance anybody will have to beat Indiana. Sure enough, Cignetti's Hoosiers won the Big Ten, cruised their way through the rest of the Big Ten, SEC, and ACC, and completed the greatest season in college football history. Everyone is wishfully predicting Indiana's downfall. Instead, Cignetti just won the offseason. They returned half their starting defense from last year. They brought in some of the best offensive transfers in the country. Nick Marsh was one of the most prized receivers to switch teams, and he'll pair up with Charlie Becker for one of the best combos in college football. They also snagged Shaz Preston from Tulane, where he had 723 receiving yards last year. They got one of the top running back transfers, Turbo Richard, who comes over from Boston College. And most notably, they replaced Heisman winner Fernando Mendoza with Josh Hoover, a rocket-armed quarterback with flashes of elite talent last season. If anybody can surround him with the proper talent and the coaching staff to succeed, it's Indiana, who also returns both coordinators from last year's championship team. Do you all remember after Ohio State won in 2024, they had to go and replace new coordinators to replace Kelly and Knowles and scramble to get guys late in the transfer portal window? Indiana keeps Bryant Haynes and Mike Shanahan, 2 of the best play callers in the country. When you look at the schedule, the Hoosiers play one preseason top 10 team at home against Ohio State on October 17th. They play at Michigan and at Washington and get USC at home. It's an easier schedule than they had last year, and there's a lot of reason to believe that they go 12-0 once again. At number 2, I'm going to stay within the state, and I'm going to go with Notre Dame. The Irish have the best team in the country, top to bottom. The depth, the coaching staff, the key skill positions, all of it is elite. The O-line is the best. CJ Carr is a Heisman contender. The defense is strides ahead of anyone else. The key, Notre Dame is flexing its national brand, its seemingly bottomless pockets, and is finally developing blue-chip recruits into results-oriented players. Brian Kelly had Notre Dame perennially in the playoff hunt. Marcus Freeman has transformed the Irish into a machine. There were some growing pains early on, right, when he was still learning how to be a head coach. But after last season's debacle, nobody is hungrier than Notre Dame. Excuse me. They were the best team in college football the second half of last season. I truly believe they were the only team that could have beaten Indiana last year. Freeman is picking the players he wants like he's picking out fruit at the grocery store. He's sifting through recruiting rankings in the transfer portal and simply getting whoever he wants. Everyone wants to play for Notre Dame. The belief in Freeman is unparalleled across the country, and they're just finally getting the pieces in place to leave no doubt and be the best team in college football. They opened the season against an improved Wisconsin team, but unlike last year, they returned the necessary experience to start hot off the blocks. The schedule is easy, but it's not a cakewalk. Playing at Ross 8 is always a trap. Playing at BYU is a massive top 10 matchup. They play an elite Navy team in Gillette Stadium. And of course, Miami comes to South Bend in November for possibly the game of the year. And the Irish finished the season with solid games against SMU and Cuse. The Irish have to have new playmakers emerge in the wake of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse return at receiver, and they will join forces with a pair of Ohio State transfers, Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. Aeneas Williams will be awesome at running back, but this offense will be more pass-heavy this year and potentially even more lethal with more downfield threats. The rest of college football won't like it, but Notre Dame is leading the way into 2026. Honestly, if you take Indiana and Notre Dame, I think those are far and away the top two teams in terms of chances to win the national title this year. If I could bet the state of Indiana to win the national title this year, I would bet that over the rest of the top 25. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous how good Indiana and Notre Dame are going into this season. At number 3, I have Miami. They came a game away from replicating Ohio State's path to a national championship. The Canes' playoff success made people quickly forget their struggles in the regular season. Miami lost ugly games to Louisville and SMU last season, and they lose more talent to the NFL than they brought in. Still, they upgraded at quarterback, the most important position, replacing Carson Beck with Darian Mensah from Duke. They avoid the other top teams in the ACC, leaving Notre Dame as the only preseason top 25 team on their schedule. Miami plays the easiest schedule in the Power 4, debatably. I'll talk about some really easy Big 12 schedules later. But Miami simply needs to avoid the same midseason letdowns that they had last year. The opening part of the schedule is weird, playing across the country at Stanford on a Friday night in Week 1, before they return to play at Florida A&M on Thursday in Week 2. Then they hit the road for another Friday night game in Wake Forest for Week 3. It's hard to see this team missing the playoffs, but it's also hard to see them replicating their same postseason success from last year without their NFL defensive stars. At number 4, I got Ohio State. The Buckeyes are preseason number 1, but there really isn't a world where they finish the season there. Of course, Ohio State returns the top QB wide receiver duo in the country, along with 1,000-yard rusher Bo Jackson, and should remain potent on offense. It'll be interesting to see how Arthur Smith does as the new OC, replacing the acclaimed Brian Hartline. The Bucs lose a lot on defense, and looks to 5 new transfers to start on that side of the ball. They do get Kenyatta Jackson back, but this isn't the same defense as it was with Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, and Caden Curry. The main reason for skepticism, the schedule. And I know it's hard to look at a schedule and say that that's why a team is overvalued going into a season. I mean, rarely should OSU fans look at the schedule and be concerned. But this is one of those years, man. At Texas in Week 2, which I'm not high on Texas, but that's still a tough game either way. At Iowa in Week 5. The last time in Kinnick Stadium, the Hawkeyes slaughtered the Buckeyes to the tune of 55 points in a game I'm sure Ohio State fans quickly forgot and Iowa fans probably will never forget. At Indiana on October 17th in a Big Ten championship rematch, across the country at USC on Halloween, back home the next week to host Oregon. The last time the Ducks were in Columbus, they won 35-28 in 2021, and of course there's the game against Michigan to cap things off. Right now, I'm giving Ohio State the benefit of the doubt and assuming they'll win most of those big games, but there's certainly a scenario where they go 9-3, missed the Big Ten title game, and then is lobbying the committee at the end of the season for one of those last playoff spots. I'll leave them at 4 for now. Number 5, Oregon. The Ducks are getting a lot of love this offseason due to the return of Dante Moore. The schedule is manageable with Eastern trips at Ohio State, Illinois, and Michigan State, along with a trip to LA to face USC. They get Michigan and Washington at home late in November. First 2 weeks feature interesting out-of-conference games against Boise State and in Stillwater against a renewed Oklahoma State team. Maddox Madsen and Drew Mestemaker are 2 of the top quarterbacks in the country, so the Oregon defense better be ready right out of the gate. Pre-ranked at number 2, I do think that's a little too generous, but Dan Lanning is doing a great job in Eugene, and Oregon will be a top contender in the Big Ten once again. Number 6, Ole Miss, the cream of the crop in the SEC. The Rebels are my pick to win the conference for the first time ever. In fact, Ole Miss has never even appeared in an SEC title game. So there's a lot of history on the line this year. Trinidad Chambliss and Kewan Lacey is the best 1-2 punch in the country, and Kirk Herbstreit labeled Chambliss as the face of college football. How about that? The defense under Pete Golding is a lot of transfers, but he's one of the best defensive minds in America. And I think they improved at the most important positions from last year's magical semifinal team. They do face Louisville in Nashville week 1, a good test to get the ball rolling. LSU comes to town and College game day in week 3. I'm not sure how I feel about game day announcing the first 3 weeks that they're going to before the season even starts. Well, what if Ole Miss loses to an upset-minded Jeff Brom in week 1? What are you going to say? No, we're not going to go? What if LSU loses to Clemson in week 1? They play another big game. What if both those teams have losses in week 1 and game day already announced they're going there in week 3? It's just ridiculous to me, but it's ESECPN, am I right? LSU is very overrated once again. This would be a legendary win early on in the season for Ole Miss. The road games are tough at Florida, at Vandy, at Texas, and at Oklahoma, but this Mississippi team is built to dominate, and this is the weakest year for the SEC in a long time. Number 7, BYU. Simply put, this is Kalani Sitake's best team at BYU. Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin are two of the best players in the Big 12, and the defense returns 8 starters from last year. How often will you see that in the modern college football? BYU is the 3rd most experienced team in all of college football. They didn't lose a single starter to the transfer portal. The Cougs are a breath of fresh air, a hard-hitting throwback team that is building a program internally with homegrown talent and development. They play 2 preseason top 25 teams, Notre Dame and Utah, with the Notre Dame game at home in Provo. My goodness, that's going to be a special atmosphere. They avoid Houston and Texas Tech, and with the schedule, they should be a lock to at least make the Big 12 title game. I do think the Big 12 is terrible as a conference, still looking for that first playoff win. And it isn't really comparable currently to the Big 10 and the SEC, but with the way things could work out this season, there's a chance that 2 Big 12 teams sneak into the playoffs. Number 8, Georgia. Georgia's good at football. It's that simple. The schedule is laughably easy for how much the SEC loves to brag about strength of schedule. UGA plays 8 home games, although the road games are at Bama, at Ole Miss, and at South Carolina, so that isn't easy. The Dogs probably won't play a single ranked team at home, depending on how good Missouri and Georgia Tech are. They should probably make the SEC championship game again. However, just like the last 2 years, I just don't feel like this team has the firepower to win a playoff game. The Bulldogs are one of the most harmed programs with the expansion to the 12-team playoffs. What will it take for them to get back to championship form? Or is there solidarity among Georgia fans in simply being in the playoffs every year, regardless of the level of success? I feel like there's some parallels to this Georgia team to some of those Penn State and Oregon teams in recent years where they are consistently being at the top. But Georgia fans have had the taste of national championship football, and so are they okay with just being at the top, or do they want to get back to that level of national championship football again? Only time will tell. At number 9, I got Texas Tech. The Red Raiders have been the talk of the town this offseason. The Brennan Sorsby situation garnered national attention for weeks, but ultimately, Joey McGuire might have gotten the best outcome. Will Hammond is a darn good quarterback, and Sorsby was by no means elite at Cincinnati last year. The amount of drama to get Brennan Sorsby as your quarterback was nowhere near worth it. If I was Coach McGuire, I would have named Hammond the starter weeks ago. The Raiders have possibly the easiest schedule in the country. I said that earlier from Miami. I think I actually mean it here with Texas Tech. They face one preseason ranked team, and that's number 23 Houston at home in week 3. They do have road games at OK State and Baylor in November, but neither of those are major tests. Texas Tech should once again play in the Big 12 championship game, and if they're 12-0 going into it, odds are that they would remain in the playoffs even with a loss. This is the best team in Texas, and they should once again find themselves in the postseason. The offense can't do worse there this time. Here's the thing. With this Big 12 situation, if Texas Tech is 12-0 and BYU is 11-1 with only that loss to Notre Dame, and then BYU beats Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game, I think they'd both be 12-1, and I think they'd both be in the playoffs despite not really having many big wins. So I think that's the situation the Big 12 is in. I think the Big 12 would love having an extra crack at a playoff win, even if I don't think either of those teams are comparable to the top teams from the Big 10 or the SEC. At number 10, I got Tennessee. Out of all the SEC teams I could put here, I'm going with the Vols. The schedule is favorable, the offseason additions are awesome, and this team truly might be a quarterback away from being elite. Jim Knowles comes over from PSU, along with some of his top defensive transfers in the country. Amari Campbell, it's the best linebacker in the SEC this year. TJ Metcalf could be a beast at safety. However, the focus this season is going to be on Faison Brandon, the 5-star freshman quarterback. He was just announced as the starter this morning. Brandon has reportedly flashed the talent and formed a connection with star wide receiver Mike Matthews. However, consistency will be the key for the young star in order to succeed in the SEC. Tennessee has been very close to being elite lately. They're doing all the right things in my book to continue moving forward. They host Texas, Alabama, and LSU with their one big road game in Aggieland in November against A&M. The schedule is backloaded, so there's some time early on for the freshman QB to acclimate to college football. However, the track record is not good for young QBs lately, with guys like Bryce Underwood, CJ Carr, Julian Sayin, and DJ Lagway all struggling in big games early on in their careers. This spot in the playoffs could easily be filled by Alabama. I think Tennessee wins that game, but if Bama beats Tennessee, I really think that they'd be in the line for a playoff spot. At number 11, Iowa. Just like Tennessee, Iowa's an overall talented team with an experienced coaching staff that plays an easy schedule. They just don't have a quarterback. Jeremy Heklinski transferred in from Wake Forest last year and sat behind Mark Gronowski. It's now his turn, and only time will tell in deciding whether he's the solution to Iowa's non-stop quarterback problems. Iowa's defense is always a brick wall, and the running game behind a Midwest O-line and Kamari Moulton will be the backbone of the offense. All this team needs is a serviceable passing game to push them into playoff status. When looking at who will be the fourth Big Ten team after Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon, you could easily say Michigan, USC, Washington, or Penn State, but I think Iowa is the most playoff ready out of that group of teams. The schedule is a major draw here. They play at Michigan to open Big Ten play in Week 4, which is an advantage to play Kyle Whittingham and Bryce Underwood early before they figure things out. If they beat Michigan, it'll be a top 10 matchup in Kinnick Stadium when they host the Buckeyes. What a fun game that would be. Then the next week they head to Seattle for a tough road game against Washington. If Iowa can survive that 3-game stretch, there isn't a preseason top 25 team the rest of the way. It's so difficult to predict who gets the last at-large spot in the playoffs, as this could be another Big Ten team like Washington or PSU, or it could be a weird ACC team like Louisville, or even an extra D6 team like we saw last year. The 11th spot, it's impossible to predict. It's going to be up for grabs the entire season up until the last week of the playoffs rankings, but I think Iowa's a solid pick for right now. At number 12, Navy. Speaking of G6, Navy is my pick to take home that crown. Last year we saw Tulane and James Madison find their way into the playoffs. This year, I'm going to roll with the midshipmen. Phil Steele rates Navy as having the 12th best offensive line in the country. Head coach Brian Newberry looks for QB Braxton Woodson to fill Blake Horvath's shoes. And they have an improved defense to take Navy to new heights. They're the favorite in the American Conference, and they play Notre Dame in Gillette Stadium on Halloween. A service academy in the playoffs is what college football is all about. All right, that's my 12 teams. I can go through it again real quickly. I got Indiana, Notre Dame, Miami, Ohio State, Oregon, Ole Miss, BYU, Georgia, Texas Tech, Tennessee, Iowa, and Navy. Let me get a quick drink real quick, and I'll talk about some of the teams that are on the cusp right outside of the playoffs. It's a lot of talking for me to do all in one sitting, man. I love it. On the cusp, I got Boise State. Next up in the G6, there's not a whole lot of competition in the new Pac-12. And I'm a big fan of Maddox Madsen at quarterback. The running back duo of Dylan Riley and Sire Gaines is elite. The Broncos will have an awesome rushing attack as always. They play Oregon week 1 and host Texas State on Halloween. Also on the cusp, USC. From a pure roster standpoint, this is one of my favorite teams in college football. Lincoln Riley's finally putting together a well-rounded group, and of course, it's led by the quarterback, Jaden Mayava. They play a brutal schedule, however, hosting Oregon and Washington, at Penn State for the whiteout, at Wisconsin and Indiana, and at home against Ohio State on Halloween. Have I said Halloween a lot? Yeah. Don't go trick-or-treating this year. College football is loaded that night. Fortunately, Penn State plays Purdue that day at home, so I might be watching Penn State Purdue instead of some of those other games going on, but it is what it is. It comes with the profession. Also on the cusp is Washington. This is a sleeper team. DeMond Williams could be elite, or he could be mid again. They get Jaden Lamar from Oregon to play running back, and they also got one of the top DB transfers, Emmanuel Carnley from Virginia. They have an easy schedule until at USC on October 3rd, so the beginning of the season's easy, second half of the season, really tough. Home versus Iowa. At Purdue is always tough. They host Penn State and Indiana. At Oregon to end the season. Definitely could be a 10-2 team and a playoff threat, though. I got Louisville up next. Week 1 versus Ole Miss in Nashville. I mentioned it earlier. Really exciting upset potential for Jeff Brom, and you can never count out Jeff Brom for a big upset game. Week 3 versus SMU. After that, no ranked opponents. 13 transfers expected to start for Brom, including Lincoln Keenholz from the Buckeyes at quarterback. It's a wide open ACC. Could the Cardinals be the team to emerge and contend up there with Miami? This is one of the most underrated teams going into this season. I'm really excited for what the Cardinals could do this year. Up next, Penn State. Penn State fans, if you missed my show from last week, go check it out. It was an awesome show projecting the entire Penn State team and roster. I've spent almost an hour talking all about Penn State football last week. But here's my little synopsis. Last year, they had the most talented roster in college football. James Franklin was gone after a 3-3 start. Terry Smith rallied the team, but all the talent from the Franklin era scattered. After a prolonged coaching search, Matt Campbell comes in to reestablish the gritty culture that defines Penn State. It's a transfer-heavy roster with several starters from Iowa State. Rocco Becht looks to make the jump to Big Ten football. Running back James Peoples comes over from Ohio State. The defense is a mix of transfers and guys that stayed for Terry, and new defensive coordinator Danton Lynn has plenty to work with. With a typical Big Ten schedule, this is a 7-5 to 8-4 team, but PSU avoids Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, Iowa, and they get USC at home for the probable whiteout game. Campbell has a prime opportunity to get a hot start in Happy Valley and could win enough games to be a playoff contender. It would take several players to emerge as stars and Becht to take care of the football and limit game-losing mistakes. PSU is a team to keep an eye on throughout this season. Next up, Houston. It's a wide-open Big 12, and Houston is in the thick of the mix. After BYU and Texas Tech, Houston is right there at the top. Connor Weigman is experienced at quarterback, and they bring in running back Mekhi Hughes from Oregon. Willie Fritz has an improved defense and an easy schedule. At Texas Tech Week 3, at Utah October 24th, home tests against UCF and Oklahoma State. That's it for the schedule. If Houston wins those couple of big games, they could be right there in the Big 12 championship come December. And finally, Alabama. I gotta talk about it because they're right next to Tennessee in the SEC competing for that last playoff spot. It's clear that Bama isn't on the same playing field in the post-Saban era, but Keelan Russell is QB, a 5-star player, and the rest of the roster still has plenty of talent. Preseason number 13 is kind of generous, and the schedule is middle of the road. Home against UGA, at Tennessee, home versus A&M, at LSU, at Vandy, all in a row, mid-season. So that is a very difficult stretch of games that they're going to have to navigate. I just don't trust this coaching staff to come through in big games. Last year's Indiana game told me a lot. and that's that Alabama can do well against the other middle-of-the-road SEC teams, but the minute they play a top 5 team in the country, they don't have Nick Saban anymore. They don't have that kind of coaching to go out and know what they're doing against the elites of college football. DeBoer has looked flustered by the pressure several times so far, but I'm willing to let him grow. I'm willing to give him the patience and the time of day to see how he can grow. We'll see if Bama fans are as patient as I am. All right, now I'm going to talk about the most overrated and most underrated teams in college football. I'm going to start with the most overrated team. It's Texas. Genuinely, what is the hype around this team? Arch Manning fell apart in ugly losses to Ohio State, UGA, and Florida last year. The wins over A&M and Michigan in the bowl game were not because of Manning, and Trey Wisner is gone. They bring in Cam Coleman, but I think he's hyped just because he's joining Texas. Would Coleman be so highly rated if he was still on Auburn? I don't think so. Colin Simmons is back. He's one of the best edge rushers in CFB. They get Raleek Brown from ASU, Hollywood Smothers from NC State to fill the running back void. This is a talented team for sure, but the coaching staff has consistently been a letdown and the schedule is vicious. Texas State week 1 followed by Ohio State in week 2 is a brutal start. At Tennessee and versus Oklahoma weeks 4 and 6, then Ole Miss, at Missouri, at LSU, and at A&M as well. I count 3 or 4 losses there easily. Just like USC, this is a talented team that got screwed by their schedule and doesn't have the coaching to win all the big games they play. That simple. LSU, this offseason has seen a lot of hype get thrown the Tigers' way. Lane Kiffin turned college football upside down last year when he left a playoff team for a team that went 7-6 last year. Kiffin hit the transfer portal hard, bringing in QB Sam Leavitt and Princely in with Uman Milan and Ty Benefield on defense. Don't miss my point here. LSU will be greatly improved from whatever Brian Kelly was doing last year, but improvement on a 7-6 record doesn't mean 10-2 and playoffs. I think LSU has the opportunities to win big games this year and propel themselves to the top of the SEC. I am just not ready to predict that to happen. Clemson week 1, at Ole Miss week 3, at Kentucky is tough, at Tennessee, and at home versus Bama and Texas. I see a few losses in there, but I'm open to being surprised by Kiffin in year 1 in the Bayou. And finally, Texas A&M. The Aggies' schedule isn't even that difficult. I just genuinely don't think this team will be that good this year. Mike Elko didn't make a ton of improvements in the offseason, and I'm not a believer in Marcel Reed as an elite QB. The Aggies benefited from playing the easiest schedule in the SEC last year, and they don't have that same luxury this time around. A&M should win enough games to be in the top 25 and maybe a playoff contender, but preseason number 8 in the country is kind of hilarious to me. All right, my most underrated teams. These aren't necessarily teams that are going to be ranked at all this year, but these are teams I just don't think are getting the time of day and the proper hype right now in this offseason. First off is Wisconsin. Luke Fickell is going into year 4. He finally has a team of his own guys. He nailed the transfer portal, getting QB Colton Joseph from Old Dominion. Joseph is one of the best dual threat players in CFB this year. They also bring in Bryce West from Ohio State, an underrated defensive back, and Abu Sama from ISU to play running back. Even if they lose all their big games, this could be an 8-4 team, and they're one upset away from being ranked. Don't count out the Badgers this year. Also, I got Oklahoma State. Eric Morris brings all of his top players in from North Texas, including Drew Mestemaker and the most lethal passing offense in the country. The Cowboys only have 2 returning starters from last year. The rest are transfers. This is a completely reformed team. Wyatt Young is an elite wide receiver, and Caleb Hawkins is a personal favorite running back of mine. UNT was my favorite team on all of college football to watch last year. And just like Kurt Signetti moving his JMU team to Indiana, Eric Morris is basically just bringing his team to Stillwater and sets up camp for a breakout first season. Next up is Florida. John Summerall has pushed all the right buttons in moving from Tulane to Gainesville. Aaron Philo comes in from GT to play quarterback, and Eric Singleton will pair with Dallas Wilson at wide receiver. Jaden Baugh is maybe the best running back in the country. He's the best running back in the SEC, and the O-line is vastly improved. Most importantly, 9 of 11 starters on defense were on Florida last year, so Summerall inherits an extremely talented defense led by Cormani McClain and DJ Coleman. Florida plays a manageable schedule and could be a surprise winner in Summerall's first season. Next up, Virginia. Tony Elliott won 11 games last year. He improved the whole roster this offseason. They bring in Bo Pribula at quarterback, a personal favorite player of mine. Pribula didn't have the best situation in Missouri. From the support around him to the injuries he dealt with, he never seemed to fully settle in there. At UVA, he'll face much easier defenses and have the opportunity to shine with his legs. UVA gets Cuse and Duke at home. They do travel to SMU and Virginia Tech. Number 19 SMU is the only preseason top 25 team they play, and the Cavaliers could easily find themselves in the ACC championship game once again. People tend to forget that team was a few plays away from being in the playoffs. Like, the Duke upset was one of the craziest games of college football last year, and if Virginia was in the playoffs last year, who knows what would have happened. I really think that was a special team last year, and they're revamping it with an even better roster this time around. Next up, I got some lower teams that just could surprise us here. I got Delaware. The Blue Hens, led by Ryan Carty, are ready to break out in 2026. Nick Minicucci, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, he decided to stick around in Delaware instead of transferring to a top Power 4 school. Listen, I would prefer Nick Minicucci over Rocco Becht at Penn State. People don't understand how good Nick Minicucci is at quarterback. He is one of the best players in the country for this year. The Hens, they have an entirely homegrown defense. Delaware does travel to Vandy and Virginia, but in CUSA play, they should have their way with things. If they win the Conference USA and they upset Vandy or Virginia, this is a playoff team, folks. This could be the G6 team represented in the college football playoffs. Keep your head on Delaware. This is a really exciting team to watch this year. And finally, I got North Dakota State. I have to mention them. Yes, it's their first year in FBS, but this team has been playing at a high FBS level for years while being content to win national championships at the FCS level. Tim Polasek and his squad joined the Mountain West with one of the best offensive lines in the country and a physical team that is just kind of a wild card this year. I'm not guaranteeing they're going to be good, but they certainly could be really good. Nathan Hayes takes over at quarterback. He's an explosive dual-threat athlete. Just keep your eye on this team. Try to catch a few of their games this year. They play a unique brand of football. They simply have won more football games recently than any other brand of college football at any level. This team wins football games. That's what they do. And what have I always said on this show? Winning translates. All right, let me get a quick drink, and I'll talk about the most fun players to watch in college football this year, some personal favorites of mine. I'm really flying through this. It's awesome. First off, I got DJ Lagway at quarterback from Baylor. Transfers in from Florida. He is one of the most electric players in college football when healthy. I can't wait to see what he does with a shot at Baylor. I already talked about Colton Joseph, quarterback at Wisconsin. Go back and watch his tape from Old Dominion last year. Joseph is so much fun. Now he looks to make the jump to Big Ten football, but I'm sure he'll be just fine. First play of last season, he took 175 yards to the house on the eventual national champions. Wisconsin opens the year against Notre Dame in Lambeau Field, and Joseph has the opportunity to become a household name on a national stage. Trinidad Chambliss, quarterback of Ole Miss, the face of college football, according to Kirk Herbstreit. Chambliss lit up the playoffs last year after a dominant regular season. This offseason was stressful for Chambliss as he navigated trying to get an extra year of eligibility. He won the case, and he's back at Ole Miss to run it back. I'm so excited to watch him play football in the SEC. Charlie Becker, wide receiver at Indiana. Chuck Sizzle, I call him, because he reminds me of Charlie Jones from Purdue. Becker was crucial in Indiana's championship run, and now he comes back to be the main guy with Cooper and Surratt in the NFL. If Jeremiah Smith didn't exist, Becker would be the best receiver in the country. Leonard Moore, DB at Notre Dame. The best DB in college football is ready to up his level even more. He's a surefire first-round pick in next year's NFL draft, and he's a turnover machine for the Irish. Amari Campbell, linebacker at Tennessee. Campbell has my vote for best linebacker in the SEC this season, alongside his new teammate Arian Carter. Campbell was first team All-Big Ten last year at Penn State, and he follows Jim Knowles to Tennessee for his senior year. I'm not sure there's a more versatile defender in all of college football. Eli and Peyton Bowen, I'm double dipping. 2 DBs at Oklahoma. The Bowen Bros combined for 70 tackles, 10 pass deflections, and 4 interceptions last season. They are the cream of the crop at DB in the SEC. And then to finish off the show, I got to talk about some top can't miss games of the season and some of the top games in week 0 starting up this weekend. Starting off at September 12th, Ohio State at Texas. That's going to be an absolute blast. Always fun seeing a Big Ten team go down to SEC land. I'll never forget when Penn State went down to Auburn and just destroyed the Tigers. Ohio State has the chance to do the same thing in an awesome top 5 matchup against the Longhorns. September 18th, Houston at Texas Tech, a potential top 15 maybe matchup in the Big 12. This game could hugely decide who ends up making the Big 12 championship game and ultimately the playoffs. Huge implications there. September 26th, Oregon at USC, the top teams in the West going at it in LA. Both of their first major tests of the season. This one's going to be so much fun to watch. October 17th, Ohio State at Indiana, rematch of the Big Ten championship game. Of course, both teams look a little different this time around, but you know Julian Sayin and the Buckeyes don't feel too happy about how that game went last year. October 17th, same day, Alabama at Tennessee. This one really could decide a playoff spot. 2 of the second-rate teams in the SEC going at it, this time in Neyland. This game's always so exciting. I remember that Reese Davis intro from a few years ago when College Game Day went there. Heck yeah, let's do that again. October 31st, Halloween night, Navy versus Notre Dame. This day is stacked. I already mentioned some of the other top games going on that day, so I'll mention this one. Navy, Notre Dame in Gillette Stadium in New England. Notre Dame, I think, is the best team in the country. Navy, I think, is the best G6 team in the country and is always so tough. They got such a good offensive line, and the rest of the roster is really good. Maybe one of the biggest tests for Notre Dame this season, and of course, if Navy won this one, that'd put them on the map. November 7th, I got 3 games here. One of the most stacked days of the whole season. Miami at Notre Dame, possibly the biggest game of the season. I don't even need to say anything about it. Catholics, convicts, this time in South Bend. Touchdown Jesus. It doesn't get much better than this in college football. November 7th, Georgia at Ole Miss. The 2 top teams in the SEC going at it on Ole Miss turf. Rematch of last year's playoff game when Trinidad Chambliss led the Rebs to victory. We'll see if he can do it again. And also that day, Oregon at Ohio State, 2 of the best teams in the Big Ten going at it. This has become a sort of awesome rivalry lately. The last time Oregon was in Columbus, they took home the W. That's kind of hard to do. We'll see if lightning strikes twice. And then week 0 games this weekend. College football officially begins. The Aer Lingus College Football Classic. UNC hosts TCU in Ireland. What a fun game. This will be TCU favored by 7.5. I really think it's tough to win by a lot in these across the country games, but TCU probably has the edge here. San Jose State goes to USC. USC starts their season a little week early. We'll see how that fares for one of the top teams in college football. USC's favored by 40. They shouldn't have any trouble with Jose State. We'll get a Power 4 game in the ACC, NC State at Virginia. This one's a ton of fun. I just said Bo Prabula and Virginia and Tony Elliott trying to push into the playoffs this season. NC State's got a solid roster looking to upset UVA right here before week 1 even starts in week 0. We got North Dakota State, another team I was just talking about as an underrated team. They start in week 0 hosting Jacksonville State. NDSU favored by a touchdown in their first game at the FBS level. Sacramento State plays Eastern Michigan in their first game at the FBS level. EMU is favored by 10 though, and that's going to be a tough one on the road in Michigan. Hawaii at Stanford, some week 0 night action in the ACC. Stanford should be able to take this one, but they're one of the worst teams in the conference. You never know what could happen. New Mexico State at Florida State, more ACC action, an easy game for Florida State to start off the season. And then finally that night we get Memphis UNLV, a huge game in the American. Playoff implications right off the bat. These are 2 of the top teams in the conference looking to get a big win early on. Awesome week 0 slate, some really big games there, some Power 4 matchups in there in the ACC. So much fun. Absolute blast. College football is back. Check out the Patreon for a full preview of week 0 with betting advice and top picks for the week. Make sure to subscribe to the Analytical Line for top college football analysis all season long. I think that's it for this show. As always, thanks for watching, and as always, go Nittany Lions.